124,068 men from 396 unions throughout Australia were on the dole by the end of March, many of them miners. Prime Minister Joseph Lyons, fresh from his sweeping victory in December 1931, was struggling to meet the economic crises in all states. Prices of primary products were at a frightening low. Output of coal was the lowest since 1917, £250,000 worth less than in 1931. The outlook was as black as the faces of the sweating miners who still held a job. Railways, the state's biggest users of coal, were helping the younger generation, who in particular faced the situation with a smile and a song. Hiking became the favorite weekend outdoor sport. It was cheap, it had to be, and it was healthy. In Sydney's Royal National Park, the 36,000 acres of bushland echoed to the voices of the happy parties. In Melbourne, the southern capital was packed for the annual St. Patrick's Day procession, a fervent expression of faith by those of the Catholic Church. Central figure once again was their Archbishop, Dr. Daniel Mannix, who had succeeded to the see just 15 years previously. The Archbishop, a native-born Irishman, who never lost a fierce love for his homeland, a God-fearing Christian and controversial public figure. Recovering from a serious illness came 43-year-old Amelita Gallicurci, famous Spanish-Italian coloratura soprano. Her second visit to Australia in 5 years, Gallicurci exchanged notes with a kookaburra.
That's the Australian kookaburra. Haven't you heard it before?
No, I would like to see one.
Well, there's one up there, you see. Well, here you are.
Oh, yes, he's
I found one for you.
Does it bite?
No, beautiful bird.
Can I take it?
Take him, yes.
Oh, how cute. Hello. Come, you're laughing now. Fine. That was great.
Beautiful.
Bravo, bravo, Janet. Si te me quieres señor cariño, yo te daré clave, bonito, y verá que me manca más atado, te estarán en contacto. Si te me quieres sereno del alma, yo te quiero más, significa y todo lo favorito, marido, estará para ti, todos son para ti. Para ti, para ti, para ti.
Even a kookaburra could be forgiven for chuckling at these fashions of the times. Remember these candlestick telephones? And this style was certainly not old hat. This is Jocelyn Howarth, a Sydney model who became a successful film star. The filter to end all filters. This young lady, of course, had been warned to keep away from cigarettes. After creating amazing endurance records in America and Europe, Annette Kellerman returned home, the first Australian woman swimmer to achieve world fame, and designer of the first one-piece swimming costume for women.
I wrote a book called Fairy Tales of the South Seas, and now I've started a novel. Of course, I don't think that'll ever see the light of day, because nowadays a novel has to have so much sex appeal, and I don't know a thing about that. Now, what am I going to do? First of all, I'm going camping for 4 whole weeks. I'm not going to wear any clothes. Well, you know what I mean. And I'm awfully glad to be back in Aussie again. It's a real thrill.
In 1932, women were still in the saddle, and for Horse Day in Melbourne, they were out in their thousands. With horses, of course. From ponies to drafts, they pranced and neighed, and on this carless day, Neddy reigned supreme. A scene far removed from the 7 horses that Captain Phillip brought with the First Fleet. A memorable sight that may never be seen again. 2,000 proud horses clattering through the streets to climax the grand parade at the Royal Melbourne Show. A credit to Victoria's rural wealth and animal husbandry. high jumping, a sport that was introduced into the first Easter show in 1886. There's an old saying that what goes up must come down. This is one of the most spectacular shots ever photographed in Australia, and neither the jockey nor the horse were injured. On the subject of water, more than 500 took the jump into Melbourne's Yarra River to compete in the annual 3-mile race as part of a Learn to Swim campaign.
Oh, back the one in the middle.
It was a splashes-splash can affair for both sexes. Plenty of kicks for both spectators and competitors. And were the male faces red when this mermaid headed the field home.
Congratulations, if we swim again, let's hope we win.
It would have been a different story if this husky chap had been a starter. Andrew Boy Charlton with coach Harry Hay. Charlton had burst into the headlines while still a lad of 14 with world record-breaking times. His memorable clashes with the reigning world champion Arnie Borg created an international sensation. He won the 1500-meter freestyle at the Paris Olympics, retiring in 1925 to take up the land. But 7 years later returned to swimming, to come within a few seconds of Buster Crabbe's world record. This effort earned Boy Charlton a berth to the Los Angeles Olympics. At Sydney Cricket Ground, the Australian Athletic Championships were staged with teams from all states striving for Olympic selection. This is the 100 yards final. Watch Jimmy Carlton break the tape, wind assisted in 9.4, 2/10 inside his Australian record of 9.6, which was never bettered in his lifetime. 2 weeks later, he announced his retirement to study for the priesthood. He died in 1951 at the age of 42. Jimmy Carlton, here seen with Eileen Wern, fastest woman of her day. The Los Angeles Olympics, 1932. Japanese swimmers rewrote the record book by speeding up the tempo of their arms and legs in a revolutionary style that rocked the swimming world. Kei Kitamura, winner of the 1500 meters, one of the many Japanese gold medalists. Glamorous Eleanor Holm of the United States narrowly beat Australia's former world record holder Bonnie Mealing in the 100 meters backstroke. 4 years later, on the way to the Berlin Games, Eleanor broke training aboard ship and was sent home. She then retired and pursued a life in films for some years. Bonnie Mealing had this to say.
The race was a very hard one, and I did my very best. I am glad that I did my best for Australia, and I think Eleanor Holm is a jolly good sport, and I'm perfectly satisfied with the result.
Success eluded most of our team at Los Angeles, but the members received an enthusiastic welcome when they returned on the Mariposa. Dunk Gray won the 1,000 meters cycling time trial in world record time of 1:13. And Claire Dennis also set a new world mark of 3:6.3 in the 200 meters breaststroke.
On returning, I'd like to introduce my baby brother, Chacha, my mascot. He was born the night I broke my world record. Here he is. Nice.
It was early morning in Sydney on April 21st, boat race day, and one of the most amazing in the history of the great public schools regattas. An armada invaded the upper reaches of the Parramatta River to watch the teenage crews of 8 schools do battle for the Major Rennie Trophy. From 1893 until 1910, the head of the river was contested by 4 oared crews. Then came the 8s. Crews representing King's, Grammar, Shore and St. Joseph's contested the final. The eliminating heats had already been run 3 days prior. No more colourful regatta has been staged on the Parramatta River, but the regatta was too big, and in 1936 the race was transferred to the Nepean River. This would help eliminate the ever-growing danger of a major catastrophe among crowded, overbalancing ferries and launches, and allow all crews to compete in the final. Every note in the gamut of noise rose and crashed about the ears of the 4 youthful crews. It was pandemonium as St. Joseph's College held offshore to record their first victory for 16 years, with Grammar 3rd and King's School 4th. Leading racing car driver of the day was Norman Wizard Smith, holder of practically every Australian record in the all-powers class. His colleague was engineer and racing driver Don Harkness. Together they worked years for one goal, the world land speed record.
I am leaving in a few moments to attempt to break a world land speed record, and I feel very confident of success. Here we are.
In 1929, Smith had just missed out with 148 miles an hour in a 12-cylinder Rolls-Royce engine job called Anzac. Now Harkness had come up with another new car powered by a Napier aero engine. Here it is in New Zealand, screaming along the beach at 164 miles an hour, and the land speed record over 10 miles belonged for the first time to an Australian, Wizard Smith.
Good old Jeff, are you?
How do you congratulations, Norm?
After unsuccessfully challenging Jack Sharkey and Max Schmeling for the World Heavyweight Boxing Championship, 26-year-old 6'3" American, young Stribling, was matched against Ambrose Palmer at Sydney Stadium. This is the voice of Stribling describing the one-sided battle.
I was the first to enter the ring, followed a few moments later by Palmer. Shaking hands, we were both sizing each other up, and at that time I didn't think the fight would go more than 4 rounds. The first bell, we feint Palmer around looking for openings. See the way Palmer gets away from those right hands. I used the right uppercut very effectively throughout. It's hard to see a lot of these punches in this picture, but they are smothered by Palmer's arms and gloves. That's the end of the first round. We'll now go to round 7. Palmer is still very cautious, but very fast. There's one of the best left hooks that Palmer landed during the fight. All these punches are not terribly effective. We're both in close, battling away, neither of us doing very much damage. My weight advantage is beginning to tell. Wearing Palmer down with rights and lefts in close. There's a good right uppercut. And this is where I thought the fight would end. Palmer's down, but a good game boy that he is, he was up at the count of 4. I'm feinting him around, trying to put over the finishing blow, but it is not easy. Palmer still has all his wits. Now it's all over.
The up-and-coming young Australian, who at various times in his brilliant career held the heavy, light heavy and middleweight championships of Australia, was 22 pounds lighter than his towering tough opponent and was beaten in 10 rounds. But no pluckier display has ever been seen in the famous arena. 2 days after this memorable encounter, across the Pacific Ocean, the world's largest dirigible, the American Navy's Akron, was approaching a mooring mast at Camp Kearney in California after a 3-day battle against storms from New Jersey. The sailor ground crew grabbed mooring ropes, and then a swirling gust of wind swept the Akron up and away. 9 sailors let go of their ropes, but 3 hung on. More than 2,000 onlookers watched, horror-stricken, awaiting the inevitable. The first crashed 500 feet to instant death. The second plummeted a few seconds later. Akron soared to a height of 2,000 feet. The third sailor, Bud Coward, clamped his feet against a knot and clung onto a wooden handle for 2 hours until crewmen in the Akron pulled him up into the cabin.
It was a grand, glorious feeling to get inside once more.
Another hero of the air that year was C.W.A. Scott. In a de Havilland Moth, he broke the England-Australia solo record established by C.A. Butler 10 months earlier in a Compa Swift by 5 hours 42 minutes. Sir Charles Kingsford Smith, who set the original England-Australia record, was one of a flight of 6 England-Australia flyers who escorted Scott after his arrival.
But really and sincerely, I welcome and admire and congratulate my old pal Scotty with all my heart and wish him all the best of luck, and may he long fly and flap his wings and enjoy further successes throughout the rest of his aeronautical career.
On January the 2nd, a German flyer, Hans Bertram, left Berlin in a Junkers monoplane to fly solo to Australia. But it was not until May 14th that he crossed the northern coastline of Western Australia and then got lost. Here you see him 37 days later, arriving in Perth after a trip which lasted 6 months, all but 8 days.
I'm very sorry that I can't speak in my own language to try to express the thanks I'm feeling I have to express to everybody. I'm personally, and my mechanic, Klausman, we are newborn in Australia. Today, I have 2 countries, Germany and Australia.
All right. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I think it'll be only fitting to give a real good cheer.
From Perth to Point Cook, the 1932 passing out parade of cadets at the famous Military Aviation School, established on the western foreshores of Victoria's Port Phillip Bay by the then Minister of Defence, Senator Pearce. Many of these young flyers were to provide the backbone of the RAAF in the great conflict to come 7 years later. Men spurred on by the deeds of these other famous Australians. Harry Hawker, hero of the Atlantic attempt. Sir Ross Smith, first England-Australia flight. Squadron leader Bert Hinkler, first England-Australia solo flight. Sir Charles Kingsford Smith, conqueror of every ocean. Though our flyers were the tops by world standards, the aircraft industry in Australia was in its infancy. 4 years previously, the British de Havilland Company opened up in Australia, but in 1932 was engaged only in the partial manufacture of the Gypsy Moth. But this steadily increasing task of assembly and maintenance was an invaluable training project for those who were to play vital roles in the Australian industry. Meanwhile, flying boats were among a wide variety of aircraft being imported from America, England, Holland and Germany, mostly for civil flying. And it was a proud day when the first fully equipped squadron of the Australian Flying Corps left Australia for the Middle East in 1916. Number 1 Squadron, like others that followed it, left an heroic page in military history, one that was handed down to the RAAF when it was finally constituted in 1921. At the end of the 1914-18 war, the squadrons of the Australian Flying Corps were disbanded, but there continued a keen interest in military aviation, both by the public and the Australian services. The Army and the Navy were taking a long, hard look at the achievements of Australia's early aviators and assessing the future. There was never any doubt that Australia would have a significant military aviation force. Basic training for the Air Force crews centered on Hawker Demons and Moths, slow, tough warriors and solid, safe trainers. Forerunners of a famous fleet, but still in the fledgling stage in 1932. A year to remember.